this workshop. It's about disruption, it's about constraints, and it will be a bit about deception as well. I will let you a bit into my brain. On the one hand, why I think these are great concepts to work with, and on the other hand, also how you can do this. So the workshop will be a lot about techniques that you can use for designing meetings, workshops, seminars, but also how to challenge yourself as a facilitator in different roles. In my workshops, some are familiar faces here, know that there will also be a lot of work for you as participants. So this is why it's also called the workshop. The idea is that we have several parts. One part is a practical experience. One part is me giving a little bit my 5 cents on the topic. And of course, along the way, there'll be discussions and ideas and reflections from your angles on whether this is relevant, challenges to my ideas, and maybe takeaways that you'll have. Before we dive into it, one more thing. Along the way, there will be things that I tell you, particularly around the exercise. Be prepared that if you ask me any questions, you'll hear my instructions were complete and thought through, because that's what they were. Don't get discouraged by that. There's currently, how many are we? 20 people, plus minus 19 people. So there's a lot of heads in the room, so you can find your answers amongst each other, but I have thought through my instructions, so it's all there what I wanted to say. But be prepared, since it's a workshop about that involves disruption, that I also might change one rule or add a rule at one or the other point. If something comes to mind, you never know with me. I don't know that yet, but I might add something here and there. Just be prepared. Before that, are there any questions? Because now I'm going to answer. And now you won't hear, there weren't any instructions yet. So anything you want to know, you want to flag question before we dive off? No? Good. Then we'll go straight into an exercise. I like to get inspiration from my exercise from different sectors. So basically, I love cross-sectoral learning. I have, Dave mentioned it in the beginning, I have worked in crisis zones and conflict zones. This is also why these topics, constraints, disruption, are something that I like to work with, because we were often faced with situations where we had nothing, and we still needed to find solutions for the problems that we were facing. So it led us to really think in different ways. It led to a lot of creativity. And I also thought, why not do this in normal settings and see where it leads to? And this is a little bit where my passion for these topics comes from, and where why I like to work with them. The first exercise that I'll do with you is inspired by something else, however, because I also have some guilty pleasures, as probably all of us have, and mine are cooking shows. I've loved cooking shows since I actually had to learn cooking when I moved away from home, and I figured that only ready-made food isn't that good. So I had to learn cooking, and I actually got into cooking shows. So this exercise that I'll give you now, that was inspired by a cooking show. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. So let me just share my screen with you, because you will need the instructions. So it's a group work. And the inspiration came from, it's not a traditional cooking show. It was more of these competitive ones that I saw recently. You might have heard the name Gordon Ramsay before. You can think about him whatever you want. He has his good sides, but he's also, has his challenges as well as a person. But he's a great chef. And in this show, there was one exercise that really caught my attention. And it was a competition where 2 cooks were put together in a team, and they had to cook with a wall between them, the same meal, the exact same meal, exactly the same prepared, and they had to plate it the exact same way. Only they were not allowed to see each other's plates. So that was the challenge. And the team that had kind of the most similar plates, so the most identical plates, and tasted the same, won. So this was the inspiration for this exercise. So there will also be breakout rooms in this exercise. You'll be put in breakout rooms. And the task is simple. Draw an image on a whiteboard. This is the task, but it's never that simple. So before I tell you the rules, I tell you the process. Okay, and again, I will only explain this once. Everything you need to know is on this slide. If you have any questions, you will have to turn to each other. The process. First, you'll be put in breakout rooms, 4 to 5 people, depending on how things should be. Yeah, 4 to 5 people. There, you have 5 minutes to discuss the strategy. You're not allowed to draw. You can discuss what you're going to draw. That's up to you, but you're not allowed to draw yet. So it's only discussing the strategy. Second, there's a meeting in the main room. So you all come back, and please, each breakout room assigns a speaker so that it's not so chaotic, who speaks for their group. And then you can discuss with the other rooms about strategy. Here you have 3 minutes. And then that's the third part, drawing. Until you tell me you're finished, or a maximum of 7 minutes. And now the rules. It's only 4 rules. Every participant must draw something. No sharing of files or images, what you've drawn in the breakout rooms. You cannot visit other breakout rooms, but you can visit the main room where I will be at any time. And all images must look identical. That's it. So whenever you're ready, yeah, Maha, be prepared that I will not answer your question, but be prepared. Please shoot.
I was just going to say all images within each breakout room or all images for the entire 19 people.
My instructions are complete.
Okay.
You will have to discuss strategy in the breakout rooms. Okay, good. Then we can open the breakout rooms. So process again, first strategy, 5 minutes.
Sorry, here. One other question that I think is relevant. Number 3, do we stay in the main room or go back to the breakout rooms for the drawing?
My instructions are complete and thought through. You have 17 other people to discuss this with. Good. Then I see you in 5 minutes back here. Good. Welcome back. I hope you've nominated speakers for each breakout room. You'll soon have 3 minutes, but before that, I just thought of a new rule. Since that I forgot one of my most favorite rules, because I'm not so keen on people asking questions, because I always think this is too easy. But I'm not going to take away I'm not going to make it a rule that you're not allowed to ask questions. But the rule is for every question you ask, you'll have 5 seconds less to draw. Okay? I think that sounds fair. I see Kate nodding. That means it's fair. So please, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes, and then we'll move into the next phase.
Okay, I've been nominated by some members of my group. What we're saying is you need to do something really simple. We may have different whiteboard apps. So if we did something like very, very simple, like just a plus sign down the middle, vertically and horizontally, that should be
Only
easy
strategy.
to make consistent.
Only strategy. No,
it is
no
strategy.
drawing. You saw what you're gonna draw.
Oh, was that not strategy?
No, not what you're drawing. Only strategy.
Okay.
I'm not taking this time away, but just saying.
Yeah. No, well, we're done. Something very simple on a whiteboard app.
We also were talking about drawing something really simple and make a screenshot out of it. And as we are not allowed to say what we want to draw, I won't say anything about that, I guess. But it's very similar to what you wanted to draw. Yeah, only maybe from corner to corner. Okay, that's it. That's what we have to say. The next group?
It was only 2 groups.
Okay, okay.
Oh, So then we can ask a question. What 5 seconds? No, who cares about 5 seconds? The question is, are we all supposed to draw the same thing across the groups, or are we supposed to draw the same thing within the group, which was not clear in the instruction? I don't know if Thomas is going to answer, but we can decide. I guess. He's just shaking his head and ignoring us, so we can decide.
It would be fun to try to draw everybody the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So yours is corner to corner rather than vertical and horizontal?
Yeah.
Shall we all try to do the same thing then? Are we going to be put in breakout rooms again, or are the 3 minutes over?
It's unclear actually, because we're all drawing something, but it was unclear whether we're doing it in a breakout room or doing it on our own.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't say breakout room.
Right.
I guess it doesn't matter if we know what to draw.
Says number 2 is no sharing of any files or images you have drawn in the breakout rooms. So that assumes that we're in breakout rooms, but it doesn't say number 3 that we're in breakout rooms. But that's not a big deal. Right. I think we can decide to do the same. There's no reason to feel like we're in competition or anything, right?
Correct.
Just because he was citing MasterChef.
Yeah, the images have to be the same. So should we have a vote on who likes corners? Just generally speaking in life, whether you like corners.
I like corners.
Okay. Time's up. I remind you again of the task. So the task is to draw an image on the whiteboard. The rules are very simple. Every participant must draw something. So this is of course a trust-based thing, but I trust you. No sharing of any files or images you have drawn in the breakout rooms. You cannot visit the other breakout room, but you can visit the main room at any time. All images must look identical. And once you're done, take a screenshot. Also, once you're done and you feel like they look identical, the images, then take a screenshot and please send them in the chat to me. Welcome back.
Oh, Thomas, what have you done to us all?
Me? We'll talk about that for the rest of the session, I think, what I've done. But I think Michael is happy now. He felt a bit trapped because the breakout rooms were closed and he was stuck with us. No, welcome back. Do you have screenshots of these that you could send to me, please? Because I will send you pretty much immediately back into breakout rooms for a little AAR. But before that, I would need your screenshots. Okay, I have one.
We can put them in the chat, can we?
Yeah, can just put them in the chat, then that should be fine. And please don't open them yet. The others, I'll prepare them meanwhile. Good. Thank you very much. So there is we could do a short session in the breakout rooms again, a quick AAR for a couple of minutes, discussing.
What's the AAR?
The action review. Sorry, it's basically just looking at how was this for you. The 3 questions are: what did we do well? And you're now in mixed groups, so speak from your experience in your group. What did we do well? What should we do differently, or could we have improved? And for which problems did we find solutions? Those are the 3 questions. And maybe one of you just takes a bit of notes, doesn't have to be too detailed, but then so that we capture a bit what you discuss. Good. Any questions? I will answer them now. So.
Could you just say those 3 questions again, Thomas?
They're also in the chat, but it's what did we do well?
Yeah.
What could we have improved or could have done differently? And for which problems did we find solutions? Okay. Good to go?
Yeah.
See you in 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes, yeah. Welcome back again. We've had 3 new participants arriving, so I'll just give a brief context on what has happened so far before I ask you to share a bit what you've debriefed. So basically, we've done a little exercise that was called draw an image on a whiteboard. The participants were split in groups, and the idea was to draw an image. Everybody should be drawing. There were a couple of rules. You were not allowed to show each other images from the breakout rooms. You weren't allowed to visit the other breakout room, but the main room, and every image, or all images, had to look identical. Those were the rules. So there was a little bit of strategy discussion, and then was drawing. Before we look at the results now, there was a little after action review that just happened when you joined, and now I would be curious to hear from each of the rooms. There was 3 questions: what did you do well? What could you have done differently or improved? And for which problems did you find solutions? The floor is open. Whoever wants to start, just fill us in. Doesn't have to be the whole discussion, just the main points of what you came to.
Okay, I'll talk about the key one that I remember the most is what we could have done differently. We could have just 1 minute discussion in the breakout rooms and just aligned. So I realized like some of us did come back to the main room, but we didn't agree when to come back to the main room. So we should have just said either after 1 minute or after whatever amount of time, or just all of us come back after we've had a discussion and just have possibly just one person tell everybody what to do. But we did sort of align on something simple to do that could have, should have worked out. But I saw some of the images after people sent them to you, and it sort of look alike.
We'll look at that in a second together. Thank you.
We felt the same way in terms of feeling like we picked an image really quickly that was simple, and we agreed on it in our breakout room. And then when we came to the main room, it was easy. The hard part was like some of the other decisions. So what would we have done differently? Picked a whiteboard first, like just keep it simple, pick a whiteboard, and deciding on like how we're going to screenshot and share. So there were a couple decision points where we were wavering. And so what would we have done differently was try to just make a decision earlier.
Third room. That was Gemma, Gabriela, Manal. Did you?
Gabriella, go on, you say.
I was gonna volunteer you, Gemma.
Oh, great.
We can do it together. So I think what I thought we did well was really come up really quickly to find what that image was going to be. So the simplicity of the image and the ideas that came out were really creative, and getting the agreement on that image. We had a lot of discussion and confusion around the whiteboard, so it would have been good to get clarity on that. But also with the image, we had we got the image, but we didn't really get clarity on the dimensions and the thickness and the color. So instead of jumping on to the next thing, we could have got more clarity on what that image looks like, and then agree with the other group on that. In terms of problems we found solutions from, we did figure out what we were going to do with the whiteboard. But I agree with Katie as well. I think we could have had more of a coordinated approach on that. And I have to say, I'm much more comfortable facilitating these sessions than actually being a participant. So it was quite interesting being a participant, because normally in terms of debriefing, it's like, well, who was your leader? What was your plan? I mean, we had none of that, and we were all talking over each other. So it was really interesting being a participant. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And then we have Kate, Bess, Alice, Hassan. Have you come any additional points?
I just like the conviviality in our group. I thought we were really enjoying the fact that we were so dumb about how we were going to go about it. And I agree with Gabriella that we really didn't align on the whiteboards, and we all had a different concept of what it meant. Do we all work on the same whiteboard, or, and no, that didn't work out that way. But I think that was our biggest stumbling block, was the support. What are we going to use to do this? And talking about planning, strategizing for the next time you send us out, decide straight away what's the most important thing. And I think everybody fixated on the image, and the image came kind of naturally, but the support and the details were not as easy to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gabriella was the one who said black and white. Okay, black, it's black. That was that. So she took charge on that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to this as well, right? And before we look at the result now, this exercise was not about, like, first of all, it wasn't about right or wrong. So that we will look at different solutions in a second, and we'll discuss throughout the whole session I will refer also where the different elements that I talk about in this session fit in, for example, in this exercise. Also, I've never done this exercise before, so thank you for bearing with me on that. So also for me, lots of learning. Speaking as a facilitator, it was as discomfortable as maybe as for one or the other participant, because I didn't know how this was going to go. If you were going to rebel on me and say like, oh, what's this for? I don't know, but you were a good sport, so thank you very much for that. And the other thing is, it's really about like, we will see what we do with the learnings, because this is a little bit where this whole thing is going, right? Why these are so crucial concepts to work with, because they allow for lots of learning in a specific direction. But I'm not going to keep more suspense. Dave, could you just quickly share your screen with the results? Some of you have already seen it. Identical is a stretchable term, let's argue, but at least the same image is there. It's both X's if you want, or at least lines that cross each other. Not 100% the same. I would have a few questions on how everybody drew and everything, but looks good for me. What do you think? Happy?
It's not going to the corners.
It's not going to the corner. Well, it depends, right? Where's the corner? You know, maybe. Anyway.
Corner is a corner.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, what does all of this have to do with constraints, disruption, and deception, and why are these even things that we can look at? I give you a little bit of an insight in my thinking now, and I'll refer back to the exercise at one or the other point, and maybe also some other things along the way. Dave said it initially, I have a very big passion for indigenous people, since I've worked a bit with indigenous peoples around the world, and I've spent some time with them, and the thinking is a bit differently. And recently in a book, I saw this quote. When we grasp fully that the natural world is not only a set of constraints, but of contexts in which we can more fully realize our dreams, we'll be on the way to a long overdue reconciliation between opposites, which are of our own making. And I let this sink in a little bit and explain to you in the next slide. This is Paul Shepard, who was actually he worked in very different fields, but his passion later on in his life was looking at how ancient wisdom influences our life today. And he researched and wrote a lot about that, but he basically was originally looking at geology and how the world evolved as in its material, and later on looked more on the soft side and the wisdom of things. So it's quite an intense quote, because it kind of captures everything why these concepts are important for me. Some of you might know this image, so please don't say this, because I've used this in one of my talks. This is a drawing that my son made to me. Has anybody who doesn't know an idea what this could be? Don't be shy, just shoot. What do you see?
Your dog.
That's a T-Rex.
A T-Rex.
Maybe a pig?
A wheel.
Okay.
The portrait of his dad.
A monster.
A frog.
Yeah. So we all see something along the similar lines. And when he came up to me drawing this, he said, "Daddy, look what I've made here." And he said, like, "What do you think this is?" And I don't know why. I think I had just this divine intuition not to answer this and just play it back, because I would have probably answered along similar lines that you. It looks like there's a mouth somewhere and a nose and something. But then he said, like, "No, Daddy, this is opportunities with a door handle." And I'm like, yeah, okay. It is opportunities with a door handle. He was, at that time, he was 5 years old. And he must have just learned the word opportunity somewhere, not knowing what it means, not knowing what it is. But for him, this is opportunities, and they come with a door handle, clearly.
And you guessed that?
No, never.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the reason why this is so wonderful is because it illustrates one of the biggest enemies of creativity that we have as adults, and that's our experience. So our experience is on the one hand a great thing, and the other side of the coin is that it limits us in thinking differently. I've recently heard on a podcast, the guest said, like, the most creative people in the world are children, because they don't know any better. They don't know the rules yet. So they cannot connect dots that we would never connect as adults, because we know how things work. But when it comes to creativity, this is actually one of the things that makes it tricky for us. So I wanted to show you this image because I think it's an illustration of where we should take our mind and where we should challenge it. Because sometimes we create our own boxes with our own experiences. And this is what is so often really in the way of thinking differently, is that we know stuff. We know how it works, and we've seen it before. When I talk about a culture of creativity, as is in the title, I refer to a few things. So whether it's an organizational culture or as an individual culture, innovation is not anymore on a podest. It's not on a podium that says like, oh, we have to be innovative, but it's actually part of the DNA. It's part of the working process. You're innovative by nature. And that means, for me, creativity is a mindset. Creativity is not a skill. Accessing creativity is a skill. Stimulating creativity is a skill. But creativity is the outcome. And creativity is a mindset. It's about how you approach the world. So in a culture of creativity, for me, innovation is a standard. It's basically you're looking for it because this is how you approach things. The other thing is, and we've done research in the first company I founded on core competencies for highly successful teams. And one of them is stimulating creativity. Because as a consequence, if you approach things creatively, motivation is high, engagement is high, people dare to do, so psychological safety is high. They feel that they're part of something, the purpose changes a bit. So you create actually a lot of team culture. And what comes with creativity, ideally, is diverse perspectives. So if you have a culture of creativity, can create is a dynamic environment where you can put different teams together. They're highly diverse in all sorts of diversity, not only gender, but like age, everything. And you create strong team cultures around it because it's one of the core competencies, according to our research. You have a high level of resilience because I worked a lot with crisis and crisis management. And one of the things that often lacks in company is the ability to think differently. If you have that, if you have a culture of creativity, you're actually you're easier finding solutions for problems. You're easier approaching problems as a challenge, not necessarily as something that is in the way or that hampers you. Like the dynamic, VUCA is this buzzword now, this buzz abbreviation now. So vulnerability, uncertainty, and all those aspects that influence our working life. Now in this symposium, New Rules of Work, I think it's important to also look at that. And resilience is something you can actually create through habits, through different ways of working. And creating creativity as one of the habits is a strong part of resilience. It facilitates cross-sectoral learning because you look not only in your bubble where you can find solutions, but you can actually look outside. A bit like what I explained, like I used the crisis management experiences to facilitation work. And there's lots of other things you can do with that, both as facilitators, as leaders, as managers, or simply as team members. You can come and think outside. How would, for example, a pilot approach this, or a carpenter? And simply that stimulus can actually make you think of new ideas. And finally, and you've done this, right from the moment you got this exercise, you've done this, you've actually questioned the assumptions that are there, because I told you a lot of things, but I also didn't tell you even more things. And those things are usually filled by assumptions. And you started to question them immediately. Where can we be? Can we be together? Can we do this? Can we do that? Just to simply get more information. Sometimes you didn't get that, like for me, but that gives you actually really the chance to work with it and formulate your own world, your own reality, because I gave you the constraints, but you, within those, you're free to move. How can we do that? Does anybody know who this gentleman is? Has anybody seen the movie 127 Hours? This is Aaron Rolfe. So this is the real person behind the character in the movie, who I think it's 20 years ago, if not 15, 20 years ago, went on a hike somewhere in Utah. I think it's called Blue Joint Mountains or something. And he got trapped. He went mountain biking, and he had a fall, and he got trapped. His right arm got trapped in between rocks, and he couldn't get it out. And after 5 days, he, with a pocket knife, was about to die. He decided to cut his arm off. And while that's of course a horrible story, but he's doing fine. He has only one arm left, but he's since actually used his experience to really illustrate for different, illustrate how you can think differently. He's a speaker and thinks about both mindset and ways of just really breaking down your own assumptions. And the way I work with this, I came across the concept that's called creative desperation. And creative desperation was first named in work by a chess player / researcher called Aaron de Groot, who is a Dutch chess master, and he did research on chess players. And in his research, he was looking at how chess players sometimes in the most impossible situations find solutions. So how did they come up with new moves, new maneuvers, and he called this creative desperation. And it's been picked up later by researchers who work a lot with insights, how we gain insights. And this concept looks particularly on when all other options that we know don't work anymore. We get so desperate that we get creative because we have to find solutions. There's lots of examples of firemen who invented new ways of escaping fires. There's lots of different examples out there. And this is what I took as the core approach to why I work with constraints, disruptions, uncertainty, and deception in my workshops. Because I want to create this. It doesn't always have to be about cutting an arm, but I want to create an environment where what we assume is not possible anymore. So we have to think differently. And the way we can create this is through these aspects. And I will tell you how I work with this on the coming slides. But before I go to that, do you have any questions at this point?
I'm interested to hear what the deception issue. Are we going to get to deception?
Deception, yeah.
Okay.
I have my own blog on deception, yeah.
Just a quick question, Thomas, on resilience. So how would you recommend to build resilience? What does that look like?
So for me, resilience is I've dealt a lot with that topic, and I came to the conclusion for myself that the best way to build resilience is through habits. And by that, I don't mean routines. For me, there's a very distinct difference between the two. Routines is the same thing in the same way, and habits is the same thing in a different way. So let's say you have a check-in at the beginning of a meeting. If you do that every time with the same question, it will become a routine. But if you change questions, if you change group size, if you change, different prompts, you create a habit of the check-in, but you do it a different way. And the reason why I say habits is because they help you. I'm not a big fan of planning and planning for preparedness and all those things, because I think preparedness is a misleading term. I think preparedness leads you into the trap of thinking you are ready you're prepared at one point. It's basically a conclusive term, but you're not. What you have to maintain is readiness. That's part of the resilience, right? And the way I work with this is by creating different habits. So, for example, question your assumptions constantly, exchange perspectives, and they might seem very simple, but they're often, because they're so simple, they're often neglected. And it's really about finding creative ways of doing that. Because the reason why that's so important for resilience is when a challenging situation comes, you will do it automatically. And that reduces the disruption. And for me, resilience is all about reducing the disruption that the unknown, the uncertainty, the event puts me through. Because the disruption is often what breaks the neck of companies. Because they don't manage to do their normal work anymore because they put all the efforts in dealing with this unexpected event or the unexpected situation, and that doesn't work out in the long run. So if you can reduce the disruption, then you already are resilient. That would be my answer. It's in the chat. Yeah, Elise just shared something, also resources in the chat. Does that answer your question, Gabriela?
Yeah, thank you.
So how do I work with this? Or let me look at this why first. Why would you, playing back to you now, when you hear like you should work in workshops with constraints, or in your everyday life, in your work process, you should introduce constraints and disruption, why would you say that? I mean, I said a bit about disruption already, but any ideas why that would be a good idea?
It's easier when you know the frame in which you can move. So that's a big constraint, and that's easier to have a frame than not having any point to hold on.
The reason why I work with it is because it helps us deconstruct mental models. So basically, if something isn't possible, you can already drop it from the option list. And if we always do the things the same way, it becomes a mental model. In our head, it becomes this routine that we have this problem, which we solve that way. But that's a mental model. Sometimes it doesn't work, and all of a sudden we don't have things available. So we must think differently. The ones who know me in this group, they know that I like to talk about MacGyver, but the whole concept behind MacGyver is that having very little and still finding solutions, because you do things differently with the resources you have available. So that's one thing. It helps us deconstruct this mental model, and not necessarily in the exercise. Very important. So the creativity can happen in the exercise like we just did, or it can lead to it, because the exercise can expose assumptions we have. It can expose limitations, and it can expose mental models that we have. So it's also about the learning. So the idea is not that constraints immediately lead to creativity. They can, but they don't have to. But they expose roadblocks, our own roadblocks on the way to creativity. And that's what I mean by mental models. It helps us effectively use resources. By that mean, there's so many things we can do with, if we don't have a functional association, we can actually have a lot of space. So if you will look at a clock, right? You can look at a clock one way, measure time, fine. But you can also look at a clock as a tool for a game, for example, which is something very different. So you can, or your own challenge, you can say like, I want to run it every time in the 24-hour day cycle throughout the year. And then you put it up. So you basically have also a monitoring tool. So it's very different ways of how you can look at a clock. And it's just one thing. And constraints help us do that, because the fewer things I have available, the more I think, what else can I do with what I have available? It gives us a stronger focus. That's also what I often see. If we have lots of things available, lots of resources, it becomes very difficult to find a solution sometimes. It's almost the same logic as behind the paradox of choice. You have way too many things available, so it's almost a bit of an abundance here. So what do I do first? You waste time, you look too much, you overthink it. The fewer things you have, the more you focus on, this is what we have to do now. It was mentioned before in the debrief, the priority angle. This helps you when you have constraints, because you're immediately focusing on what's going on. You're reshaping your box, because we all have our box and we all want to think outside the box, but through constraints in a facilitation way, you can actually reshape it. You can actually set very different boundaries on what would be expected it is. And by that, you might automatically take the people outside the box, because that might not be the same constraints that were there before. So you really create a very different context than people might be initially having when they approach a problem. And when you give constraints, all of a sudden, those boundaries look different. And it creates an innovation practice. So if you work a lot with constraints, this question, what else can we do with this? How can we do this differently? Becomes a constant mindset. And remember, when I've said this before, for me, creativity is rooted in mindset. It is a mindset. And part of it is to work with constraints, to maybe think like, I don't have this available. So it doesn't work. Disruption, on the other hand, slightly different. They often go interlinked, but also very important to me at this point to say you don't always have to use all of them. So you don't have to use constraints, disruption, and deception. You can use small things at one point here and there. And why disruption is important? The first thing, I don't think you would have said to read here is rest the mind, but it is very important. One way of getting insights, creative and new ways of thinking is called incubation. So you might have heard this, that when you have a problem, you go to sleep, you wake up, you have the solution. So with disruption, you can actually force a break, for example. You put the mind to rest. There is, and again, MacGyver. So the inventor of MacGyver, Sotloff, I think his name is, wrote a book on what's called the MacGyver method, where he explains how he uses what this character does in the TV show as a real method for businesses. And the MacGyver method, simply explained, works: you write up your problem, you go away, you do something else, you distract your mind, you come back to it, and then you pick what problems your mind that actually works nonstop behind whatever activity you do, what solutions came up with it. And he, of course, explains this in a bit more detail, but that's simply explained. It's just giving the mind a rest, because you might know this. If you look too long at a problem, you end up at the same solution and it just doesn't feel right. But the moment you walk away, go for a walk, whatever, yeah. And this you can facilitate. You can force people to do that rest of the mind. So that's where disruption comes in. So you could, if something is a problem, you could do a different exercise, for example, right? And we will talk in a second on how you can implement that. You can make space for emotions, one of my favorite topics. The longer you look at something, the more difficult it gets, the more frustrating it gets. With disruptions, meaning a break, meaning taking it away, you make space for these emotions, you come back with a clear mind. A lot of negative frustrations, they really cloud our judgment. They blur a little bit our vision. If you make space for that through a disruption, and again, disruption has such a negative connotation for a lot of us, and it's not. It doesn't have to be. Disruption is just simply disrupting a process that's going on. That's all it is. It increases resilience because you're dealing with the unexpected better. You're used to getting to deal with the unexpected. It doesn't throw you off so easily anymore, just like what I explained before, by practicing mental flexibility. That means you can quickly shift your focus, you can reshift your focus, so you're used to that. It becomes an automatism. Our brain, many of you certainly know that, our brain works on plasticity, right? So we can actually train it to do certain processes. And if we do that with disruption, which seems to be a counter natural process, it still works because it becomes more flexible. And finally, readiness for the unexpected. So you have that constant alert. It's not a negative one, but there's always this lens on something can disrupt and I'm ready for it. And that's exactly what we want when we talk about resilience, but it's also when we want to talk about creativity, because you're looking for what you're not seeing. You're looking for the invisible. And that's also where creativity is often hidden. Any questions before I tell you how I work with it practically? Give you some concrete ideas on how you can maybe work with it.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
And maybe you've already gone over this, and I was wondering, how does one in this, as a leader, how does one understand and then, or investigate the difference between an assumption and a true constraint?
That's a very good question. I can only tell you the first thing that comes to mind here. I think an assumption is not always a constraint. An assumption is basically just simply how we make up a process or how we assume the world to be. So whether that's a future assumption, whether that's a functional assumption, there's lots of different assumptions. But sometimes when we're not coming somewhere, when we're not going somewhere with where we want to go, it becomes a constraint, because that's when the assumption is in the way. Like when we go back to the exercise, right? You made lots of assumptions because I didn't tell you. I didn't give you the information, so you had to make assumptions. Some of them might have turned out to be constraints. So the assumption was that you have to do this in breakout rooms. It wasn't said anywhere. Nowhere, right? So this was an assumption and you turned it into constraint. So I think you can only do this, unfortunately, you only do this in retrospect. But I think when you train, you can quicker do it, because you can exchange perspectives. You put an assumption on the table, and then the more people look at it, the more easy you will find out whether it stops you or whether it's something you have to take in order to move forward. Does that somehow answer the question? I'm pleased that the floor is open. So if you have perspectives, just I'm happy to hear that as well.
No. Elise and David both agree at the constant questioning and whether or not like an assumption might be able to be changed, whereas a true constraint will not.
There are some really cool techniques for assumption busting that you can actually adapt to in workshops, you know, if you've got time. But
yeah, I remember you wrote about that. I saw that. Yeah.
I will go find that. Thank you.
So how do I work with this? To give you a couple of the things that I apply, and this is I'm not so keen always on sharing this, but for Elise I do that. So most obvious thing, you just limit resources, and the most important thing here, resources is literally everything. Information is resource, time is resource, well, tangible things are resources, people are resources, you know, senses are resources. So you can just limit whatever you want. And the point is just really getting these artificial constraints in a way, which just doesn't allow for certain things to happen. And of course, as facilitators, we all know we might face resistance at one or the other point. Although I haven't often happened that. I have heard a lot of complaints, but I've never really faced like a rebellion. I was like, okay, we're not going to do this, because it's and if they don't want, it's also fine, because it's ultimately in their interest. But yeah, just be prepared that there will be questioning why to do this. Don't have to just discuss the why before. It's fine to discuss that after. Set artificial boundaries. So that's they can be unrealistic, but I always recommend that they keep within the realm of realism, because that's of course where you make yourselves less vulnerable. If you come with a Star Trek constraint, right? You might lose some people in your groups, but something that's possible, that can actually happen, a resource that can be taken away, but artificially, because that also gives it a bit of a playful character, right? You can, of course, in real-time simulations, make that more realistic, but when you do workshops, seminars, and really play with the concept, I recommend in the beginning to be a bit artificial, to also find your space in it, because you saw it requires some certain additional things when you work with it, and then we'll discuss more in the deception element. But it's also really make this your own, right? It needs to work for you as well as a facilitator. Love games. So game-based techniques, even within a game, you can enter constraints, and everything that happens within games is transferable in the work and private life. That's a bit underestimated. So many of you might work with games anyway. So this is just as much learning. And I always have to laugh when usually it's the managers of the teams that hired me, that came to me at one point and said like, well, now we played a lot, but let's do something real now and serious. And like, you think we didn't do anything now? It's like, now we just played. Like, okay, let's just figure out what we did. And when we go into this communication, collaboration, everything, problem solving, then is the understanding, okay, this was just an arena where it played out. It was just a method. You can, and this is a very funny way of doing it, you can actually play the responsibility to the group. So you make different levels of difficulty, and then the group decides which difficulty they want to play. Because then you're, as a facilitator, you're a bit in the safe, because it's like, I just gave you the overall frame. You decided that you wanted to have it as difficult. Because what this also does is the external authority that's often, then labeled as the main enemy in a way, inverted commas, is gone. Because they designed their own difficulty. They designed their own constraints. And also what that does, the mastery is a lot higher, because we did this, we managed this. So you create a momentum in a team. So different levels of difficulty that the team decides at the end is also an option. And finally, a method that I've been working a lot more with, I want to break the lock between there's a problem and there's a solution. I want to break this. I want to have like this solution might be for this problem, yes, but this solution might also be for 50 other problems. So what constraints does is you say like, okay, you have a solution, but for which other problems can you use this? Instead of starting always with the problem to find a solution, let's turn it around. Let's look at the solution we have and see what other problems we can serve with that. You might be surprised how much there is to find, and how much teams actually find. But it's also a form of constraint, because you only allow them one solution, which have to cater for different problems. When it comes to disruption, unexpected changes. Sure, that's an obvious thing, but can be anything. Work with an extra rule, or if you have an intuition, say like, I would try this. Don't be shy, try it. This is disruption. It's fine. The people will deal with it. I can guarantee you, we often as facilitators underestimate what groups are able to do. This is also in a one way why I say like, I don't need to give you all the answers, because you're 17 people that together 100 times smarter than me. So you'll find a lot of answers. But if I give you the answer, I just steer the process even more. And I don't necessarily need to do that. Incubation methods, I've already said, that can be breaks, that can be different exercises. Very important. What doesn't work so well for incubation is relationship activities. So for example, it's not such a, if you want to find this incubation in the sense of you want to find creative solutions for a problem, do not necessarily work with dialogue exercises as disruption, because that doesn't give our mind a break. So focused exercises, technical exercises, riddles, they are very good. Everything that's social, even social media, so basically screens, are not good for those exercises. So everything that's a bit calmer, that changes the environment, that maybe just puts the focus on one thing, that is, those are good incubation methods. Play with authority, of course, external and internal authority. These can always be disruptions. So have this person that comes in and say like, well, do you want to add something? Do you have a question? Those things are unexpected because you have a bit of an uncertainty factor there. Always works as a disruption, and really sharpens the senses of the participants. Work with competition and a bit provocation, always works. Add a layer, like have a collaborative exercise, but have also make it at the same time a competitive exercise. Like for example, you have an exercise with conflicting goals. So you say, you have to find, for example, here's an orange, typical peace building exercise. So here's an orange, discuss on how many ways you can share this orange so that more than one people benefit from it. You can say that. And then say like the one with the most solutions or most ways wins. But then you add a factor where you say, but everything that's named by one then more group doesn't count. And at the end, you have to make sure there's only a winner if every group has at least 10 valid answers. So you have a lot of competitive goals here. And that can be disruptive because they have to discuss what's more important for us, that we win, or that we all win, or that we actually have a winner, or that we have different answers, or that we are as creative as possible. So you can, with that simple instruction, you have 6, 7 objectives of that exercise. And that's all in a way a disruptive, because they immediately hear when they hear, oh, we have to have the most. That's the focus. And then you come with the disruptive exercise, but you can only win if everybody has at least 15 right answers. Oh, now we have to think differently. There's the disruption, right? Just to give you an example. And challenge bingo. This is also something I like to do sometimes, which is just either you ask the participants to come up with unexpected challenges and write them on a card, and here and there throughout the workshop or throughout the meeting, they pick up a card, and then this has to happen. Or you write a few of them up, put it in the center, and here and there let them pick one up, yeah, it becomes a disruption in the sense that it's an unexpected thing that all of a sudden happens. So that's also one of the methods that is very simple and has quite a high effect if you put it in, because it's also a fun factor there. Right? Any questions? Let me just see. I'm just reading Dave's comments here. Still think about constraint versus assumption. Might a constraint originate externally and assumptions originate internally? I think that's a mix. My perspective is that is mixed. Constraints can be induced internally, but we can also put them on ourselves, because when we have a mental model, it constrains us naturally. The example that I always give when it comes to mental models is table manners. They're so different everywhere in the world, but I was naive before I left Austria, where I'm originally from. I was naive enough to think like, oh no, everybody has the same table manners. I was so naive that I didn't even think about that. And then this guy sits down opposite me in South Africa with a hat on while we're having dinner, and I had a physical reaction. Like you cannot you cannot do that. No hats at the dinner table. I heard my father's voice saying like, it's not allowed to have any hats at the dinner table, right? Understanding that this was my mental model, this is how I looked at the world. So I put this own constraint on myself, even though my father gave me the rule, I adopted it as this is how it is. So I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between. And of course, as facilitators, the idea and what I tell here is external constraints, right? But at the same time, how these constraints are played out within the groups, I have very little control over. And this is where we slowly move into deception. But before that, questions, thoughts, comments to this.
But that ultimately ended up being an assumption about the hats, right?
An assumption that turned into constraint for me, because a limited constraint, because I had a reaction, right? I had a reaction to it because it constrained me from like seeing the broader world. It's like, yeah, this was it. It didn't limit me from doing anything because I deconstructed that model, right? But I could have also reacted like my father would have, like, you can't have hat at the table, right? So, and then you already would constrain the relationship, the way this dinner plays out. So I think there's a lot of those things attached to that. No questions? Good. Then we go getting into my favorite part. Who thinks deception is a bad thing? You just raise your hand. Elise, Manal, okay, you. Why? Why?
Because it shows that you were wrong on the beginning, that you had an assumption that didn't come true. Mm-hmm. So you have the possibility to get it right after the deception.
Okay.
I think it doesn't help people trust you when you deceive them.
But there must be harmless deceptions. Or is every deception like really so serious?
I always think of deceptions as an opportunity for growth. When something doesn't work out, then you're obliged to cast around and find another solution. I didn't always believe that, Elisa. I used to think that a deception was just deception, but I learned through some major disruptions that I had to become accustomed to the idea that this will happen and there are always solutions.
I was just thinking about my kids. And with my kids, I'm often kind of deceiving them, sometimes not often, I sound like, yeah. But, sometimes just to be playful. Like this morning, I was doing sleight of hand and tricking him. That's the deception. But sometimes it's to manage the environment as well, to maybe apply constraints. Yeah, in a manipulative way, I guess I think there can be playful deception and it doesn't necessarily break trust. I think with the kids, what it does is more kind of makes them more alert or makes them pay a bit more attention sometimes. So I don't know, can be constructive too.
And don't underestimate how often kids deceive us, because that's one of the skills that it develops actually rather quickly when they see the effect of it. But I had the pleasure to meet a really international deception expert in a conference a few months ago, and he had the keynote speech, and afterwards we had a long conversation, and he started his speech like saying, everybody thinks deception is lying, but it really isn't. Lying is part of deception or one way of deceiving, but it's not. He said, like, we all deceive each other. Like in the first half hour, we usually deceive each other at least 30 times, whether it's an alarm clock, it's time to get up, but our inner clock isn't ready. So deception, makeup, brush, using tooth whitening toothpaste. Those are all things that fall into the broad spectrum of deception. And he said the problem with deception is that people it's gotten a really also like crisis, like disruption, a very negative tone to it. But he said the key to deception is what is the intention? Like every magician, is deceiving people because it's basically creating a reality that you want the people to see. But it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Like Santa Claus is a deception, right? Or maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't want to make a statement whether it exists or not, but at least some think it's a deception. Manon.
So I wanted to add to it, but you got into your presentation, Thomas. So initially, when I hear the word deception, I agreed with Elise, like the truth element of it. But I deceive my siblings all the time, and it's mostly like kind of what you said, like impact over intent. Like if they get into like an argument with each other, like I'll go over to one and I'll ask them, you know, Amin is really thinking about you, like he asked about you this morning, and I'll go to the other one and be like, haven't you talked, like don't you miss doing that with the other person? And it actually increases their relationship towards it, like they warm up towards each other. So in that sense, am I deceiving? Yes, but like the intent and the impact is both good, and so that's kind of what I go with. So I raised my hand because like my initial thought was like it violates the trust element, but just thinking about like the impact that it can cause as well, and sometimes it can have a positive impact, and so deception can be a good thing in that case.
Making like a bold statement now. We know each other very well, right? So I would assume you trust me at least to a certain degree, but you also know that I've deceived you many times in my workshop. So it's not always this reaction is not always there, because it's really, for me, it's connected to the intent, and that was just an eye opener. And Simon Henderson is this deception expert's name, and I really recommend checking out his work, because it just made me also think. He writes a lot about deception and creativity as well. So the way he describes it, the way he defines deception, it's deliberate measures to induce erroneous sense making and subsequent behavior within a target audience to achieve and exploit an advantage. Now, the exploit part can, of course, also be interpreted negative, but it can also be interpreted positive. Because for as facilitators, we have actually the chance to maybe expose assumptions, like Marta was saying before, which is the blockers to creativity in some ways. So that's why deception, in some form or the other, is not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to facilitation, if you use it with care and with a good intent. He also writes in some of his writing, he actually says deception is an art form. So that's also falling into creativity. Why? I think we've already said this now exposes assumptions. I think it facilitates aha moments. I think it does when you at one point say like, wow, okay, I really didn't think this, right? When I said before to Kate, you could have all stayed in the main room in the first exercise and draw if you decided to, because there was no limitation on that. But the assumptions weren't there, right? The assumptions were different ones. It allows for a holistic experience, because when you deceive, you also have emotional connections. It's like, that's magic, or there's like excitement, or something is or frustration. So there's also emotions involved. You actually learn with your whole body when you use deception in a facilitation setting. It creates an attentive mindset, which is a good thing, because when I do this the first time in a workshop, people are a bit surprised, and then they start questioning everything I say. And that's a good thing, because that's questioning their own assumptions about it. What did he say? What did he not say? Yeah, it's more important what I didn't say than what I actually said. And those things can be created by using deceptions in different forms, because again, you create a habit, and it's a creative process in itself. So it stimulates your own creativity for how you can design, how you can talk, how you can communicate. Looking at time, I'll tell you a few methods on how I do that. Storytelling. Like I set the stage today with a simple story. That it's the exercise had only limited part to do with the story MasterChef was pointed out was the show, but about what these people did in MasterChef. It was just inspiration. But I created images in your mind. There's a wall between you, that you're not allowed to see what the other person does. It's a simple story, but he created an image in your head. Deliberate and limited instructions. So when I said in the beginning, my instructions are thought through, and they're complete. This is because I have thought through, and how do I formulate it? So that I not undermine my own deception, right? So if I would have said like, draw images on a whiteboard, I would have already undermined my own deception that it's possible to only write one, right? Possibly. Could have also been interpreted different ways. So it's very important to think about how how your instructions sound. Have a specific focus. Like, for example, a classroom. You set up five chairs in one corner and 5 chairs in another corner, and you tell the people, pick a chair. And the next thing you tell them is find a logo and a name for your group. And 100% of the time, you will have 2 logos and 2 names afterwards. Nobody said they should do it in 2 groups. You just simply created the reality of the chairs standing so far apart. So it's basically you put the focus on something else. You distracted them from where the focus should be with the story, with the way you set up the room. And what it does is, again, it exposes assumptions, particularly when you have collaboration issue in a team and you do that. You expose an assumption that you can't work together. But that assumption happens only once because they will never fall for that again. This is the beauty of it. Visual illusions, right? I could have easily said, find more, find as many solutions for the problem as this. When I did this, I thought of a list of 10 things and hold this up. And I would have never written a list of 10 things. This is just a visual aid for what I wanted to say. But you might have thought I made a list of 10 things, which already gives you a competitive element that you have to have more than 10 things. Fine for me. But this is just something I thought of, right? So you can easily, like magicians, you can make people see what you want them to see. And the room setup I have already explained. So deception can have different forms. It doesn't have to be serious. It's just small things that distract, to shift the focus away from maybe the obvious. And again, it helps them to just see things differently. And in retrospect, you'll see like, oh, I was deceived, but I see the intention why. And that's when the trust breaking isn't there. Sure, they will become more skeptical to you, but it's not that they don't trust you anymore because they see the benefit that it has for them. And I look at the time and I have only a few minutes left and I would like to hear your thoughts, but I give you one last list of success factors and pitfalls. For me, those are 2 sides of the same coin. I call this disruptive design. That's what it is. It's not a typical design. It's just you might have certainly worked with one or the other element yourself, but I think it has a lot of advantages. But it also is important that you as facilitators embrace certain things. One of them is imperfection. I've never tried this exercise today, but that's not really a problem because either way, there was no right solution. All of them were right. It's all about the experience. Whether you solve it, you don't solve it, there's always something to reflect over and it doesn't matter. And the same is like imperfection is also something to reflect, to explore. So that's why I'm always a bit against failure, the aspect of failure, because ultimately it's just learning. If you turn it around, just learn from that. But failure gives it a negative touch. Finding a balance, meaning like don't only do disruptive design. That will not go well, I tell you that. It's not very popular. Just add elements here and there, and because people will get annoyed when you fool them all the time. Then you'll lose them. So don't do that. Avoid predictability. That's anyway for you as facilitator. You keep them at their toes, right? Start differently. Start with a bang. I love to start with a bang because it keeps people on their toes and you immediately grab attention. I know there's workshop where you should slowly soothe in, but I prefer the other way around because it also creates maybe a discomfortable experience, but it brings the group together because it's a collective discomfortable experience which creates connections within a group. Your own ambition level is the biggest enemy you have. It doesn't have to work out that way. So even if they don't find the solution you would see, it's just more important that they find a solution. You can just add yours on. So if it doesn't go the way you plan it, fine, just lean back and see where it's going and then see what you take away from it, either for the next design or for this particular reflection. Don't get discouraged. It's not always easy. Sometimes things don't work out the way they should. Just continue and go for it. And finally, play with diversity. So it's very important that you use different methods, different people, different aspects, and use it in different settings. So diversity is also a key factor. And don't lie. That's important because lying is a bad way of deceiving. I don't believe necessarily in white lies, but it's just really don't lie. Just create a space that makes them believe something you want them to believe in order to expose the assumptions. But don't lie. This is a trust breaker. I want to conclude with a picture of one of my greatest teachers, as you see on the photo. And the author of Winnie the Pooh had a fantastic quote. One of the advantages of being disorderly is that one is constantly making exciting discoveries. So with that sense, I thank you for your attention, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the last, maybe we get 1 or 2 minutes. I'm sorry that I'm a bit over time. I'd love to hear some thoughts maybe.
We can take a couple of minutes for feedback, reflections. Remember, one of the prompts is how is this going to tie into the larger piece, which we'll add as we close, but yeah, observations, questions for Thomas.
I wanted to say that one of the points that you say that you get the team to get closer together if they're deceived from you. It was one of the observations we had that at some point in the group we say, well, we don't really have rules, then let's make our own rules. That was one of the spirit behind it. Like, if we don't have like good rules, let's get together and make new rules. So it worked.
No, that's fabulous.
Okay.
Definitely please log some of your experiences. You know, how did you experience this? I know how I experienced it. I see some real appreciation in there. Not everybody experiences it in the same way. So being able to triangulate that is also really, really helpful. And then feel free to reflect or break or mingle. But thank you, Thomas.